Worms of the Earth by Robert E. Howard. Chapter 2. In an inner chamber of Eboracum, the man called Bran Mak Morn paced tigerishly to and fro. His sandaled feet made no sound on the marble tiles. "Crom," he turned to the gnarled servant. "Well, I know why you held my knees so tightly, why you muttered aid of the moon woman. You feared I would lose my self-control and make a mad attempt to succor that poor wretch. By the gods, I believe that was what the dog Roman wished. His iron-cased watchdogs watched me narrowly, I know, and his baiting was harder to bear than ordinarily. Gods black and white, dark and light." He shook his clenched fists above his head in the black gust of his passion. "That I should stand by and see a man of mine butchered on a Roman cross, without justice and with no more trial than that farce. Black gods of Arlae, even you would I invoke to the ruin and destruction of those butchers. I swear by the nameless ones, men shall die howling for that deed, and Rome shall cry out as a woman in the dark who treads upon an adder." "He knew you, master," said Grom. The other dropped his head and covered his eyes with a gesture of savage pain. "His eyes will haunt me when I lie dying." "Aye, he knew me, and almost until the last. I read in his eyes the hope that I might aid him. Gods and devils, is Rome to butcher my people beneath my very eyes? Then I am not king but dog." "Not so loud, in the name of all the gods," exclaimed Grom in affright. "Did these Romans suspect you were Bran Mak Morn, they would nail you on a cross beside that other." "They will know it ere long," grimly answered the king. "Too long I have lingered here in the guise of an emissary, spying upon mine enemies. They have thought to play with me, these Romans, masking their contempt and scorn only under polished satire. Rome is courteous to barbarian ambassadors. They give us fine houses to live in, offer us slaves, pander to our lusts with women and gold and wine and games, but all the while they laugh at us. Their very courtesy is an insult, and sometimes, as today, their contempt discards all veneer. Bah! I've seen through their baitings, have remained imperturbably serene and swallowed their studied insults. But this, by the fiends of hell, this is beyond human endurance. My people look to me. If I fail them, if I fail even one, even the lowest of my people, who will aid them? To whom shall they turn? By the gods, I'll answer the jibes of these Roman dogs with black shaft and trenchant steel. And the chief with the plumes," Grom meant the governor, and his gutturals thrummed with the blood lust. "He dies." He flicked out a length of steel. Bran scowled. "Easier said than done. He dies. But how may I reach him? By day his German guards keep at his back. By night they stand at door and window. He has many enemies, Romans as well as barbarians. Many a Briton would gladly slit his throat." Grom seized Bran's garment, stammering as fierce eagerness broke the bonds of his inarticulate nature. "Let me go, master. My life is worth nothing. I will cut him down in the midst of his warriors." Bran smiled fiercely and clapped his hand on the stunted giant's shoulder with a force that would have felled a lesser man. "Nay, old war dog, I have too much need of thee. You shall not throw your life away uselessly. Sulla would read the intent in your eyes besides, and the javelins of his Teutons would be through you ere you could reach him. Not by the dagger in the dark will we strike this Roman, not by the venom in the cup, nor the shaft from the ambush." The king turned and paced the floor a moment, his head bent in thought. Slowly his eyes grew murky with a thought so fearful, he did not speak it aloud to the waiting warrior. "I have become somewhat familiar with the maze of Roman politics during my stay in this accursed waste of mud and marble," said he. "During a war on the wall, Titus Sulla, as governor of this province, is supposed to hasten thither with his sentries. But this Sulla does not do. He is no coward, but the bravest avoid certain things. To each man, however bold, his own particular fear. So he sends in his place Caius Camillus, who in times of peace patrols the fens of the west, lest the Britons break over the border. And Sulla takes his place in the Tower of Trajan. Ha!" He whirled and gripped Grom with steely fingers. "Grom, take the red stallion and ride north. Let no grass grow under the stallion's hoofs. Ride to Cormac na Connacht and tell him to sweep the frontier with sword and torch. Let his wild gales feast their fill of slaughter. After a time I will be with him, but for a time I have affairs in the west. Grom's black eyes gleamed, and he made a passionate gesture with his crooked hand. An instinctive move of savagery, Bran drew a heavy bronze seal from beneath his tunic. "This is my safe conduct as an emissary to Roman courts," he said grimly. "It will open all gates between this house and Baldur. If any official questions you too closely here." Lifting the lid of an iron-bound chest, Bran took out a small, heavy leather bag, which he gave into the hands of the warrior. "When all keys fail at a gate," said he, "try a golden key. Go now." There were no ceremonious farewells between the barbarian king and his barbarian vassal. Grom flung up his arm in a gesture of salute. Then turning, he hurried out. Bran stepped to a barred window and gazed out into the moonlit streets. "Wait until the moon sets," he muttered grimly. "Then I'll take the road to hell. But before I go, I have a debt to pay." The stealthy clink of a hoof on the flags reached him. "With a safe conduct and gold, not even Rome can hold a Pictish reaver," muttered the king. "Now I'll sleep until the moon sets." With a snarl at the marble frieze work and fluted columns as symbols of Rome, he flung himself down on a couch from which he had long since impatiently torn the cushions and silk stuffs, as too soft for his hard body. Hate and the black passion of vengeance seethed in him, yet he went instantly to sleep. The first lesson he had learned in his bitter hard life was to snatch sleep any time he could, like a wolf that snatches sleep on the hunting trail. Generally his slumber was as light and dreamless as a panther's, but tonight it was otherwise. He sank into fleecy grey fathoms of slumber, and in a timeless misty realm of shadows, he met the tall, lean, white-bearded figure of old Gonar, the priest of the moon, high counselor to the king. And Bran stood aghast, for Gonar's face was white as driven snow, and he shook as with ague. Well might Bran stand appalled, for in all the years of his life, he had never before seen Gonar the Wise show any sign of fear. "What now, old one?" asked the king. "Goes all well in Baldur?" "All is well in Baldur, where my body lies sleeping," answered old Gonar. "Across the void I have come to battle with you for your soul. King, are you mad? This thought you have thought in your brain." "Gonar," answered Bran solemnly, "this day I stood still and watched a man of mine die on the cross of Rome. What his name or his rank, I do not know. I do not care. He might have been a faithful unknown warrior of mine. He might have been an outlaw. I only know that he was mine. The first scents he knew were the scents of the heather. The first light he saw was the sunrise on the Pictish hills. He belonged to me, not to Rome. If punishment was just, then none but me should have dealt it. If he were to be tried, none but me should have been his judge. The same blood flowed in our veins. The same fire maddened our brains. In infancy we listened to the same old tales, and in youth we sang the same old songs. He was bound to my heartstrings, as every man and every woman and every child of Pictland is bound. It was mine to protect him. Now it is mine to avenge him. But in the name of the gods, Bran, expostulated the wizard, take your vengeance in another way. Return to the heather. Mass your warriors, join with Cormac and his Gaels, and spread a sea of blood and flame the length of the great wall. All that I will do, grimly answered Bran. But now, I will have a vengeance such as no Roman ever dreamed of. Ha! What do they know of the mysteries of this ancient isle, which sheltered strange life long before Rome rose from the marshes of the Tiber? Bran, there are weapons too foul to use even against Rome. Bran barked short and sharp as a jackal. Ha! There are no weapons I would not use against Rome. My back is at the wall. By the blood of the fiends has Rome fought me fair. Bah! I am a barbarian king with a wolfskin mantle and an iron crown, fighting with my handful of bows and broken pikes against the queen of the world. What have I? The heather hills, the wattle huts, the spears of my shock-headed tribesmen, and I fight Rome. With her armoured legions, her broad fertile plains and rich seas, her mountains and her rivers and her gleaming citizen wealth, her steel, her gold, her mastery and her wrath. By steel and fire I will fight her, and by subtlety and treachery. By the thorn in the foot, the adder in the path, the venom in the cup, the dagger in the dark. Aye, his voice sank solemnly, and by the worms of the earth. But it is madness, cried Gonar. You will perish in the attempt you plan. You will go down to hell, and you will not return. What of your people then? If I cannot serve them, I had better die, growled the king. But you cannot even reach the beings you seek, cried Gonar. For untold centuries they have dwelt apart. There is no door by which you can come to them. Long ago they severed the bonds that bound them to the world we know. Long ago, answered Bran somberly, you told me that nothing in the universe was separated from the stream of life. A saying the truth of which I have often seen evident. No race, no form of life, but is close-knit somehow by some manner to the rest of life and the world. Somewhere there is a thin link connecting those I seek to the world I know. Somewhere there is a door, and somewhere among the bleak fens of the west I will find it. Stark horror flooded Gunar's eyes, and he gave back, crying, Woe, woe, woe to Pictdom! Woe to the unborn kingdom! Woe, black woe to the sons of men! Woe, 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 woe! Bran awoke to a shadowed room and the starlight on the window bars. The moon had sunk from sight, though its glow was still faint above the housetops. Memory of his dream shook him, and he swore beneath his breath. Rising, he flung off cloak and mantle, donning a light shirt of black mesh mail, and girding on sword and dirk. Going again to the iron-bound chest, he lifted several compact bags and emptied the clinking contents into the leathern pouch at his girdle. Then wrapping his wide cloak about him, he silently left the house. No servants there were to spy on him. He had impatiently refused the offer of slaves, which it was Rome's policy to furnish her barbarian emissaries. Gnarled Grom had attended to all Bran's simple needs. The stables fronted on the courtyard. A moment's groping in the dark, and he placed his hand over a great stallion's nose, checking the nicker of recognition. Working without a light, he swiftly bridled and saddled the great brute, and went through the courtyard into a shadowy side street, leading him. The moon was setting, the border of floating shadows widening along the western wall. Silence lay on the marble palaces and mud hovels of Eboracum under the cold stars. Bran touched the pouch at his girdle, which was heavy with minted gold that bore the stamp of Rome. He had come to Eboracum posing as an emissary of Pictdom to act the spy. But being a barbarian, he had not been able to play his part, in aloof formality and sedate dignity. He retained a crowded memory of wild feasts, where wine flowed in fountains, of white-bosomed Roman women, who, sated with civilized lovers, looked with something more than favor on a virile barbarian, of gladiatorial games, and of other games where dice clicked and spun, and tall stacks of gold changed hands. He had drunk deeply and gambled recklessly, after the manner of barbarians, and he had had a remarkable run of luck, due possibly to the indifference with which he won or lost. Gold to the Pict was so much dust flowing through his fingers. In his land there was no need of it, but he had learned its power in the boundaries of civilization. Almost under the shadow of the northwestern wall, he saw ahead of him loom the great watchtower which was connected with and reared above the outer wall. One corner of the castle-like fortress, farthest from the wall, served as a dungeon. Bran left his horse standing in a dark alley, with the reins hanging on the ground, and stole like a prowling wolf into the shadows of the fortress. The young officer Valerius was awakened from a light, unquiet sleep by a stealthy sound at the barred window. He sat up, cursing softly under his breath as the faint starlight, which etched the window bars, fell across the bare stone floor and reminded him of his disgrace. Well, in a few days, he ruminated, he'd be well out of it. Sula would not be too harsh on a man with such high connections. Then let any man or woman jibe at him. Damn that insolent Pict. But wait, he thought suddenly, remembering. What of the sound which had roused him? Hushed! It was a voice from the window. Why so much secrecy? It could hardly be a foe. Yet, why should it be a friend? Valerius rose and crossed his cell, coming close to the window. Outside all was dim in the starlight, and he made out but a shadowy form close to the window. Who are you? He leaned close against the bars, straining his eyes into the gloom. His answer was a snarl of wolfish laughter, a long flicker of steel in the starlight. Valerius reeled away from the window and crashed to the floor, clutching his throat, gurgling horribly as he tried to scream. Blood gushed through his fingers, forming about his twitching body a pool that reflected the dim starlight dully and redly. Outside, Bran glided away like a shadow, without pausing to peer into the cell. In another minute, The guards would round the corner on their regular routine. Even now, he heard the measured tramp of their iron-clad feet. Before they came in sight, he had vanished, and they clumped stolidly by the cell window, with no intimation of the corpse that lay on the floor within. Bran rode to the small gate in the western wall, unchallenged by the sleepy watch. What fear of foreign invasion in Eboracum? And certain well-organized thieves and women stealers made it profitable for the watchman not to be too vigilant. But the single guardsman at the western gate? His fellows lay drunk in a nearby brothel, lifted his spear and bawled for Bran to halt and give an account of himself. Silently, the Pict reined closer. Masked in the dark cloak, he seemed dim and indistinct to the Roman, who was only aware of the glitter of his cold eyes in the gloom. But Bran held up his hand against the starlight, and the soldier caught the gleam of gold. In the other hand, he saw a long sheen of steel. The soldier understood, and he did not hesitate between the choice of a golden bribe or a battle to the death with this unknown rider, who was apparently a barbarian of some sort. With a grunt, he lowered his spear and swung the gate open. Bran rode through, casting a handful of coins to the Roman. They fell about his feet in a golden shower, clinking against the flags. He bent in greedy haste to retrieve them, and Bran Mak Morn rode westward like a flying ghost in the night.